What should you expect from CJ Stroud, Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, and Will Levis in fantasy football 2024? We give you our second-year quarterback projections only on Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. We're part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com. My co-host, Michelle Madzuk, is off today, so we'll continue our look at the teams in the NFC North with the Green Bay Packers on our following show. But today, I'm going to talk about an article that I had up at sportingnews.com projecting the second-year quarterbacks. These are the three taken in the first round, and Will Levis in the second round. So look at what CJ Stroud can do for an encore. Will Anthony Richardson be healthy and produce the way we thought last year? And can Bryce Young rebound into a pretty good fantasy asset? So we'll look at all that on today's show. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Okay, let's start with the guy that was the star of fantasy last year among the rookie class, and really the only valuable asset after Anthony Richardson went down after 4 games with a shoulder injury. CJ Stroud was fantastic. He was a great reality quarterback. The Texans won the AFC South, went into the playoffs, so won a round there as well against the Browns. So really a good season for Stroud overall and this offense. Bobby Slowick, D'Amico Ryan. Slowick stays as the offensive coordinator here in Houston. That was a big thing for Stroud going into year 2 to avoid the sophomore slump. Let's look at his numbers from last year before we analyze his outlook for this year. 4,108 passing yards, 23 TDs, 5 interceptions, 63.9 completion percentage, a very robust 8.2 yards per attempt, a very nice 100.8 passer rating, and QB10 average scoring. So yeah, he was a QB1 top 12 finisher as a rookie. We don't see this very often. And CJ Stroud also led the league in passing yards per game. He missed a few games there. So when you look at that, that is a pretty great rookie season overall. And he would have won the passing yardage title had he played all the games. So a lot of good stuff to build on here for CJ Stroud. Again, we like that the situation remains intact. In fact, it got better, folks. So Tank Dell is on the mend here from his injury and had that off-field incident. Here, Nico Collins has got his new shiny, lucrative contract extension as the number 1 outside receiver on this team. They still have Noah Brown. They still have Dalton Schultz. And now they're joined by Stephon Diggs. So you add Stephon Diggs to the weapons that are already here with the production that you've seen from Stroud. So this could be a very big year from Stroud. The one thing you're not going to get necessarily is that cheat code rushing. He's a good athlete, but that's not his game. He doesn't have to do that. It's a 49ers-like system. So I think a good parallel to take away here is Brock Purdy. And we saw what Purdy did last year for really executing that offense well. That yards per attempt, very similar, of guys who can push the ball downfield well, but also get some space for guys and get them yards after the catch. So it's a very quarterback-friendly and receiver-friendly offense that we know that the Texans run. I mean, we see it all over the league that have that 49ers connection here. Going down to Miami with Mike McDaniel, Slowick taps into it quite a bit in Houston as well. So really good situation we know for Stroud. I like that all the variables are in place. We talked about that a little bit. It's nice to know that there's not much change. There's only addition to this. Now, he also gets a very capable pass-catching back in Joe Mixon. And move on from Devin Singletary. Mixon is a much better receiver and pass protector than Singletary. So that's a really good addition here for the checkdowns and getting additional weapons there on top of Schultz at tight end. They also added Ben Skoranek to add some depth on the back end of their offense. So, again, I don't know if Skoranek will make the team, but they did make a commitment overall when you look at Diggs and the way this receiving room has been stacked up with Collins getting his extension to make sure CJ Stroud isn't hurting for weapons, in fact, has more than he had last year. We could see a change on the offensive line as well. Laramie Tunsil, really good at left tackle, but Titus Howard has not been that great. So you could see the rookie Blake Fisher starting out there, and that would be a help as well in pass protection for Stroud. So very good feelings here for CJ Stroud overall in year 2. How does he build on year 1? Now, let's look at the passing yards. I think they can go up quite a bit here. When you look at where Purdy's at in a similar style of offense, I think available up to 4,500 passing yards. And even with a run-heavy approach, you can get there. But I would think the Texans are going to be a little bit more pass-happy than the 49ers. So 4,400, I think, is in the bank here. Now, 30 TDs, when you look at last year getting 23, it didn't seem like it was 23. It felt like more than that with the weapons, but now he has Diggs healthy, so another person to catch passes in the red zone. He's got Collins, that established connection here. So Mixon, we know, can also contribute that way. And so the yardage and the touchdown should go up. So I'm giving him 4,400. So it's a healthy number. It's about 300 yards more. And again, he would have really cleared this if he had got there with all the games last season. So I'm being a little bit modest here. This is probably more of his floor, but I'm doing a floor for him because, again, this shows you the real potential. But again, you're not going to get too much running. So I think he's going to be a little bit more aggressive throwing the ball because of Diggs and just having more confidence. So 32 TDs. I think the interceptions will go up. 5 was an incredibly low number for a rookie. I think they'll go up to 10. Nothing too crazy, but you get 32 TDs. So we'll be happy about that. Almost a 9 to 10 TD improvement there. Completion percentage should stay rather steady, but should go up 63.9. I have it at 65. And I like him to surpass 8 yards attempt again, 8.3, what I like, and very efficient there, 103.4 passer rating. So all that is within reach because it's very similar to what he did last year, only giving him the benefit of the doubt that he's going to play more games and be a little bit more efficient and proficient with downfield passing this season. So he's anywhere between a QB 6 and 10. So average around QB 8. That's definitely an improvement from last year where he finished at QB 10. So that's the projection for CJ Stroud. Again, this is not so difficult when you're just adding to a good thing and you know the scheme works, the quarterback plays well, and the weapons are great, and the team is pretty good around him. So there are really no question marks here with CJ Stroud, one of the safest quarterbacks with this floor that you can take on the board. Now, there's going to be a little bit more volatility with the rest of the second-year quarterbacks. We'll get into them. We'll look at what Bryce Young can do in a new offense, as well as Will Levis. In between, we'll also explore Anthony Richardson, what might have been and what could be now with a full season with that shoulder injury. We'll get to all that in our next 2 segments. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It's getting exciting. The Mavericks could not eliminate the Timberwolves, so the Timberwolves took care of business on their side of things, pushing the series back to Minnesota. They're still down 3-1, so there's some excitement there. How about the Rangers and the Panthers? They're tied at 2 in their exciting series to determine the Eastern Conference in the NHL. It's winner take all time in both of those leagues, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Check out the odds. Get all the action there that is going to bring home the win. And again, take advantage of that offer again. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to make every playoff shot count for you. All right, let's turn our attention to Bryce Young and Anthony Richardson. These were the other 2 quarterbacks taken in the first round. Young at #1 overall, Richardson at #4 overall. So Young, the disastrous first season with the Panthers is behind him, thankfully. Frank Reich was fired not too long into the season, so they turned the page. Not even some continuity there in year 1 with Young and the offensive-minded coach. Now we get a new offensive-minded coach, Dave Canales, and if you've seen what he's done, he's turned Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield into delayed fantasy football assets when we didn't expect anything out of them. Geno Smith takes over from Russell Wilson. Canales helps him as a quarterback's coach. He gets promoted to the offense coordinator at Tampa. Baker Mayfield was a nice sleeper and produced last year. So that's really good for Bryce Young, and he has nowhere to go but up, folks. I mean, look at these numbers from last year. 2,877 passing yards, 11 TDs, 10 interceptions, 59.8 completion percentage, so not even 60% there. Measly 5.5 yards per attempt, 73.7 passer rating. And as you can imagine, he was way down among average scorers at quarterback QB 43, so not even rosterable or streamable at any point in the season, really, Bryce Young. So highly disappointing to have those numbers when you're the starter pretty much for the most of the season. Now, when we look at this, it's not just Dave Canales. He brought Brad Idzik from the Buccaneer staff, so they're going to implement the offense that Baker Mayfield had last season. They went out and traded for Deontay Johnson, sent the corner Dante Jackson to the Steelers, drafted Xavier Legette in the second round. They were really tied to him. Then went out and got an athletic receiving tight end in the draft as well, Jatavion Sanders, and from the same program, the Texas Longhorns, a running back, Jonathan Brooks. And in free agency, they invested a lot as well at guard, getting Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt to start on the left and right side, respectively. So this is a lot to add to a quarterback in year two. The holdovers here are Adam Thielen, Jonathan Mingo. We've seen some good clips of Young and Mingo really connecting at OTAs already for the Panthers, so that is good. So, look, Bryce Young is a smart guy. He's got a great skill set. He can move around to the pocket well. He's got a good head on his shoulders. He's got good mental makeup, and he's willing to learn and grow. So I think that's all going to be welcome here with Canales, who's been a great teacher. I like to call him the quarterback whisperer because that's what he's done. I mean, these are two veterans that he just turned around, and Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield, where they weren't putting up close to the type of efficiency numbers. And the biggest thing that he got going with both of them was the downfield passing game, a big lack there for the Panthers last year. I mean, stretching the field and getting the ball on the outside perimeter. Now you've got another reliable kind of route running target in Deontay Johnson to go with Adam Thielen. They can explore what they have in Mingo and Legette to be the big play threats on this team, and you'll see that happen. We know what we saw with Geno Smith and DK Metcalf. That was unlocked by Canales a little bit more, as well as Tyler Lockett. Last year, we saw Baker Mayfield and Mike Evans totally being a dominant to force connecting downfield. So that's really good news for these receivers here. Again, Legette and Mingo, the youngsters, the second-year guy, Mingo, are the guys to watch here to be those kind of big play threats. Excuse me. What we look at here is the potential for just a different style of passing game here. So let's look at what I like for him this year. I think I'm going to be shy of making it too aggressive with the numbers. I still think they'll protect him by having a run-heavy offense. Brooks should be involved in it with Chuba Hubbard. And I don't think Miles Sanders will be on the team, but Brooks, once healthy, they'll probably roll with him and Hubbard and move from Sanders here in the backfield. So I still think taking pressure off him with the running game will be important. But what I like about Dave Canales, what did they do last year? It wasn't just throwing downfield to Evans. It was using the checkdowns to Rashad White. So really getting in a comfortable position, Mayfield, to stretch the field, play off play action when needed, and get those favorable shots downfield. So I'm not going to go for 4,000 passing yards. It's a massive leap from last year, and I don't think you can get there. But 3,900, I think that's within reach here as numbers for Young. 26 TDs. It's a drastic change, 15 more TDs. But when you look at it over the course of 17 games, that shouldn't be so difficult with this group of receivers. I think the interceptions are going to be about the same here, 11. I think it'll be more efficient, but it'll go up that number. Completion percentage is the biggest thing I would expect to move up here around where we saw Smith and Mayfield in this offense, 64. 7.2 yards per attempt. Again, there were some ups and downs, but they don't mind to check it down instead of forcing it downfield. And a 93.0 passer rating. So this would be all really good news for the Panthers that he would turn things around. So that puts Bryce Young probably in the QB 14 through 16 range. So deeper leagues, you could look at him. Super flex, he has a lot of appeal. He's one of the better sleepers on the board because, again, he's an afterthought, and you can probably get him much later than that in drafts. So, again, this is one of the better values here in year 2. Now, Anthony Richardson is not going to be a good value because you're going to have to pay up to get him. But, folks, it might be worth getting him. Let's look at the stats from last year. We know he only played 4 games, really 2 games because he wasn't healthy for 2 of them. He missed one in between and the shoulder injury. 577 passing yards, 3 TDs, 1 interception, 59.6 completion percentage. Not great there. 6.9 yards per attempt, 87.3 passer rating, 136 rushing yards, 4 rushing TDs. That was a nice number in 4 games. And he also, in 2 of the games where he was fully healthy, had 10 rushing attempts. Shane Steichen, he's the architect behind Jalen Hurts. We know Hurts was a running machine in year 2 before he had his big breakout in year 3 in Philadelphia. We know that Richardson has the kind of Lamar Jackson in him with the big arm and can run. So, yeah, that's why the ceiling is extremely juicy here for Anthony Richardson. Now, they didn't add a lot in Indianapolis, but they didn't really get a chance to evaluate Richardson with what he already had. But they did add Adonai Mitchell, A.D. Mitchell out of Texas, to add another playmaker there with Michael Pittman Jr. and Josh Downs and Alec Pierce. They're hoping to get a little bit more out of him. And the tight ends, a little bit of a crowded room, but Jelani Woods would seem to lead the group there. And the good news for him is they feel good about his health because they went with Joe Flacco. Gardner Minshew is gone. He's going to be the bridge starter most likely with the Raiders. So Flacco comes over. He extends his career from that super sub stint with the Browns last year. So another person to feed off. And keep in mind, Joe Flacco made a very smooth transition to Lamar Jackson. It was very helpful and instrumental in that in Baltimore. So he's going to be very supportive here as an older quarterback here for the Colts. So I like that. It's like kind of having an extra guy that can communicate things here. Keep in mind that Flacco was with the Eagles briefly, so he has a little bit of a good absorption of the Shane Steichen offense to kind of impart his wisdom there as the strong arm passer, that part of his game, to Richardson. Now, this is all good stuff for Richardson. Again, you can see a lot of parallels between him and Jalen Hurts going into year 2. So that's promising. We know Hurts was a nice little fantasy sleeper before he exploded as like the fantasy stud there that we know and love now as a consistent top 5 QB. Now let's look at the numbers here that I think Richardson can get to. So again, this is going to be a dual threat. I also think the Colts are going to be a rather run-heavy offense with Jonathan Taylor full healthy out of the gate. We know what Steichen's offenses can do. We've seen the big numbers there on the ground, Miles Sanders in particular. So you'll see a lot of rushing success from this team. That's what this offensive line and its strength is right now. So 3,700 passing yards. So that's a modest number. That's why I do like 24 passing TDs, also a lower number because, again, they're going to be running quite a bit here traditionally. 8 interceptions. I think they'll be careful with him, much like they were with Hurts. I see a completion percentage go up, maybe some shorter passes for him, 63%. 7.5 yards per attempt. I think it'll even out. There's going to be some things where he misses and looks bad on some throws, but there are going to be some deep balls that look pretty, particular to Mitchell and Pierce downfield. So that's going to even out at 7.5 here. 95.2 pass rating, solid there. 720 yards rushing. That's about where you can look at it. I don't think he's going to go Lamar nuts in year 2 that yielded 1,200 rushing yards, but I also don't think it's going to be too disappointing here. We know he's going to get some carries. I mean, I think Jonathan Taylor can cut into a little bit, but still plenty of attempts there. If he's getting 10 per game last year, that could adjust to like 8, but I still think 720 yards is reachable here for him, and 8 rushing TDs. So that's really good. And we're pushing more because we want to know about the ceiling for Richardson. We push more for the ceiling on his stats. So the one thing you look at can stay healthy with that playing style. So when we look at Richardson and his just upside, it's tremendous here. 21.8, that would put him in Lamar territory. So QB 5 to 7, that is his ceiling right now. So again, you have to maybe accept that Richardson has had some durability issues. We know with the shoulder, the concussion last year that cost him a game before he went down for the season. That's going to come with the territory with running quarterbacks. I think you'll learn to get a little bit better at protecting his body. I know Jalen Hurts is rather durable, but we've seen Lamar miss time as well. So, again, Richardson needs to prove himself in that area, and that comes there with a little risk. But again, don't be too aggressive here. I still think you want to take the original article in Lamar if you're going to go here. Kyler Murray might also be close to his numbers, but again, if you're looking for that upside among those second-year QBs, again, Richardson has that potential, even with those rough numbers, to be a top 6 QB in the top half here in 2024. All right, we'll look at Will Levis in our final segment here. He's the second-round QB of this group, but he's definitely the bona fide starter in Tennessee, and he can also benefit from an exciting new offense. All right, we will get into Will Levis in a moment. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, let's close the show looking at our fourth second-year quarterback and their fantasy football projections for 2024. His name is Will Levis. So he started 9 games last year in the back end as the transition happened from Ryan Tannehill. 1,808 passing yards, 8 TDs, 4 interceptions. Not too bad there with that ratio 2-1. 58.4 completion percentage, 7.1 yards per attempt. That was okay for a rookie. It wasn't totally check down city, but you could do a lot better than that. 84.2 passer rating. He was QB 37. So nothing to see there. But he was notably ahead of Bryce Young in average scoring fantasy points per game. So, but Bryce Young and Levis have this in common. New offensive-minded coach. Brian Callahan comes to the Bengals. We know what he did with Joe Burrow working with Zach Taylor. You also get Nick Foles from the Jaguars. He spent 1 year with Doug Peterson helping Trevor Lawrence. So Callahan and Foles are your offensive brain trust for the Titans. And they got some connections here. So Calvin Ridley played with Foles with Lawrence and the Jaguars. He comes over late in free agency. They also had Tyler Boyd from the Bengals, Callahan's old guy in the slot. So they pluck him there in between Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. Now he's in the mix between Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins. So some big names now on this receiving core. We'll see about getting some results out of Treylon Burks and Nick Westbrook-Akine and Kyle Phillips. We'll see if any of these guys are really in the mix. But, man, you upgrade there with Ridley and Boyd. You get a reliable slot. You get a big play on the outside from Ridley. And then you look at tight end Chigakonkwo still around. And on top of that, you had Tony Pollard, a really good explosive back who's best running outside and can finish well in the red zone when needed. He didn't do that well last year in Dallas, but he has done that in the past. So Tony Pollard and Tyjae Spears providing the 1-2 punch to replace Derrick Henry as this team transitions out of a run-heavy offense. We know that. This team threw only 55% of the time last year. So that number should go up because you look at the Bengals and Jaguars, 2 of the pass-heaviest teams last year. That was despite Burrow going down for the Bengals. They still threw a lot there with Jake Browning. And the Jaguars kept on throwing, even though Trevor Lawrence was struggling. So these were 2 top 10 frequency passing games from last year. So this is going to be a total 9-day difference. It's about what we'll see with the Steelers, right? And what they're going through with Arthur Smith going in a different direction away from what we saw before. Same thing here. This is going to be an absolute flip from what we've seen with the Titans. So they're not going to be run, pound the ball, throw, play action downfield, get the points that way. It's going to be passing first to set up the run this season with Callahan and Foles. So when we look at the potential here, again, it's not just these guys in the skill positions here with Ridley and Boyd and Pollard in the mix with Spears and Hopkins and Okonkwo and those guys I mentioned. But you have J.C. Latham, important acquisition in the draft in the first round. He's their new left tackle. So he goes with Peter Skoronski, the first-round left guard from 2023. And this was an underrated pickup, Lloyd Cushenberry from the Broncos. He takes over at center, one of the league's best pass-blocking centers, very good at what he does. So this is a very good angle of pass protection. Will Levis was sacked 28 times, so more than 3 times per game when you look at his 9 starts last year. So Will Levis should be very excited about this situation because, again, he's going to be better protected. He's going to have more opportunities to throw the ball downfield. And in the case with him and Young, I think it's prove it or they're going to move on. I mean, they've done everything they can. I wouldn't say they went all in to help Will Levis, but pretty close here in Tennessee. So I'm excited to see what Levis can do. There are some parallels we can draw between Burrow and Lawrence, but again, there's still a lot to be said about Levis's talent. Both of those guys were number 1 overall picks, so we want to see Levis maybe push it with a little bit more consistency downfield. So I'm looking forward to seeing what we can get out of him. I think he'll be much improved. He'll be more comfortable in the pocket. I still think he's going to make some mistakes, be less efficient than those other guys, but I still think he's going to flash enough to say that they're going to believe in him into year 3. So I'm for 4,100 passing yards, about a 61% completion. That takes it up about 2.5 from last year. So not too drastic of a change. I have 7.4 yards per attempt, so modest there, but still more effective this season. They're increasing. I have him for 25 TDs, but 14 interceptions, and an 88.1 pass rating, around QB 17 to 19 numbers is what we're expecting. With all these cases, Richardson, I did include the rushing totals, of course, but you pad on a few rushing numbers here and there, so that boosts their value for Stroud, Young, and Levis. They're good athletes, enough to pad those numbers a bit, maybe get a touchdown or 2 on the ground there as well. So keep that in mind. That could bump up their values. But conservatively, that's where I have Will Levis here in year 2. That's not bad. I mean, a big improvement. Keep in mind where he was, QB 37. So you're looking at 20 spots there as the regular starter all season long and focusing on a really good offense here. So QB 17 to 19 is his range. Then a little bit earlier, I like Bryce Young, QB 14 to 16. Then I look at CJ Stroud, QB 8 through 10, and then QB 5 through 7 for Anthony Richardson there. So those are the projections as of now that we like before training camp for these second-year QBs in fantasy football. Thanks so much for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today and every day. Don't forget, as we mentioned here on the network, exciting stuff all across the channel. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. For Locked On Fantasy Football, this has been Vinnie Iyer. Bye, y'all.